Hey there, history enthusiasts! Welcome to our channel, where we will be delving deep into the captivating world of the past. Today, we have a special episode that will shock you with 10 truly horrible historical facts that you probably never learned in school. Buckle up, because it's going to be an eye-opening journey. Did you know that during the reign of Emperor Nero in ancient Rome, he would sometimes use Christians as human torches to light up his garden parties? It's a horrifying example of the brutal entertainment that took place in those times. Emperor Nero, infamous for his extravagant lifestyle, had little regard for human life. The oppression of Christians was prevalent during his reign, and he came up with new and sadistic ways to torment them. This included dipping people in oil, impaling them on stakes, and setting them ablaze as human torches for his evening festivities. These gruesome displays were meant to both entertain and terrorize the citizens of Rome. In the Middle Ages, the notorious practice of trial by ordeal existed. People accused of crimes would be subjected to torturous tests, such as being thrown into water to see if they would sink or float. Innocence or guilt was determined based on the outcome, leading to unimaginable suffering. During the Middle Ages, justice was often delivered through trial by ordeal, a deeply flawed and merciless system. In this method, the accused person would undergo a physically demanding test to determine their guilt or innocence. One such ordeal involved being tied up and thrown into water. If the accused sank, they were deemed innocent, as water was believed to eject the guilty. However, if they floated, it was considered a sign of guilt, and they would be subjected to further punishment or execution. This practice often led to severe injury, drowning, or a wrongful conviction, perpetuating a cycle of brutality. In ancient China, the practice of concubinage was widespread, where women were essentially enslaved and forced into a life of servitude. In ancient China, the institution of concubinage was deeply ingrained in society. Wealthy men often took concubines, who were essentially secondary wives with lower status. These women were purchased or acquired, and then forced into a life of servitude and subservience. Their rights and freedoms were severely limited, and they lived under constant scrutiny and competition. While concubinage was socially accepted at the time, it represents the subjugation and objectification of women. The Maori land wars in New Zealand led to significant loss of Maori land and thousands of lives. In the 19th century, the Maori people of New Zealand faced land confiscations and armed conflicts, known as the Maori Land Wars. The wars erupted between Maori tribes and the British colonial government over issues of sovereignty and land ownership. The wars resulted in significant loss of Maori land and thousands of lives. The consequences of the conflicts had lasting effects on Maori communities, shaping New Zealand's history and land rights struggles. During the Salem witch trials in colonial America, innocent men and women were accused of witchcraft, leading to mass hysteria, trials, and executions. The Salem witch trials, which took place in Massachusetts in the late 17th century, represent a dark period in American history. Fear, paranoia, and religious fervor led to the accusation of innocent men and women of practicing witchcraft. The trials that followed were marked by biased testimonies, lack of due process, and the belief in supernatural powers. This hysteria resulted in the execution of 20 people and the social upheaval of an entire community. During the Spanish Inquisition, individuals were tortured and executed in the name of religious purity and conformity. The Spanish Inquisition, which was established in the late 15th century, aimed to maintain religious orthodoxy and eliminate heresy. However, its methods involved brutal interrogations, torture, and public executions. Those accused of heresy or nonconformity faced persecution, with their lives and beliefs at stake. The Spanish Inquisition created an atmosphere of fear and religious oppression, leaving a long-lasting impact on the history of Spain and the lives of countless individuals. The stolen generations in Australia involved the forced removal of Indigenous children from their families, resulting in cultural disruption and trauma. From the late 19th century to the 1970s, the Australian government implemented policies that forcibly removed Indigenous children from their families, known as the stolen generations. These children were placed in institutions or adopted by non-Indigenous families, resulting in the loss of cultural identity, language, and connection to their communities. The stolen generations had a profound and lasting impact on indigenous communities, leading to intergenerational trauma and ongoing efforts for healing and reconciliation. During the Armenian Genocide, the Ottoman Empire systematically targeted and killed approximately 1.5 million Armenians in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. The Armenian Genocide, which took place during World War I, involved the systematic persecution and extermination of the Armenian population by the Ottoman Empire. Armenian civilians were subjected to mass deportations, forced labor, and outright massacres. The genocide resulted in the deaths of approximately 1.5 million Armenians, along with the displacement and destruction of communities. Recognition and commemoration of this tragic event remain important issues today. The Chinese Cultural Revolution, led by Mao Zedong, resulted in widespread political persecution, violence, and the destruction of cultural heritage. From 1966 to 1976, China experienced the tumultuous period known as the Cultural Revolution, led by Chairman Mao Zedong. The movement aimed to enforce communist ideology, but it quickly spiraled into extensive political persecution, violence, and chaos. Countless individuals were subjected to public humiliation, forced labor, and imprisonment. Cultural heritage, including historic sites, artifacts, and ancient texts, were destroyed in an attempt to eradicate traditional and bourgeois influences. The Cultural Revolution left a deep imprint on Chinese society and continues to be a subject of reflection and debate. The Hero and Nama genocide in German Southwest Africa, in the present day known as Namibia, saw the deliberate extermination of thousands of indigenous peoples. In the early 20th century, German colonial forces perpetrated a genocide against the Hero and Nama peoples in German Southwest Africa. The colonial administration implemented policies aimed at exterminating these indigenous groups, resulting in mass killings, forced labor, and forced displacement. It is estimated that up to 80,000 Hero and 10,000 Nama people lost their lives during this genocide. The Herero and Nama genocide stands as a stark example of colonial violence and the lasting impact it has had on affected communities. There you have it, 10 truly horrible historical facts that are often left out of traditional education. It's essential to acknowledge and learn from the darker aspects of these terrible events.